Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, What's So Special About Seagrass? My name is Jenny and I'm from the Marine Conservation Society. For anyone that don't know who we are a UK-wide charity working towards better health of our ocean by connecting people with science and generally defending habitats and species and working towards a healthier ocean for us all. Today's webinar is going to introduce you to seagrass, what it's about, why it's so important, what we can all do to help defend it, and some of the work the Marine Conservation Society are doing to help protect this important environment. Just before I pass over to our expert today, Dr Jean-Luc Solandt, I would just like to tell you a little bit about how the webinar will work to start with. So there's going to be a Q&A later on at the end of the session. So during the course of the content and what we're talking about, you can drop down into the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, and you can add questions that we'll come back to later. You'll be able to see other people's questions and you should be able to upvote. So the ones that you like the best, you should be able to vote for. And then we'll get to those ones in turn. We'll try and answer as many as we can at the end. There's also a chat box as well, which you can use to get in contact with us. You won't be able to see each other's comments in there, but you will be able to communicate with me. It'll be mainly me that will be checking the chat box while Jean-Luc is talking. And obviously we will be able to get back to you via the chat box as well. And at the end, there's a quick poll that I would like to launch just to get some feedback from you guys as well. So with no further ado, I will just hand over to Jean-Luc, who will begin our session. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Can you hear me, everybody? Wave if you can. Great to be with you today, even with the strange circumstances we're all in. The marine environment is out there, promise you. It's still there, and we need to still think about what our interaction is with that environment. And seagrass is a very special habitat. That initial slide shows how extensive the blades are. They really grow up to about 1 to 1.5 meters tall. They can be extremely dense, so that you're like wading through a meadow that you might be walking through in one of your long walks that you're probably taking at the moment. It's very much like a terrestrial meadow, a meadow on land. You can even see in one tiny part of this image, you can see, if you can see my cursor here, a little a jellyfish, or an anemone actually, sorry, that lives on the seagrass beds. So a very dense habitat. Here's another anemone further down to the bottom right of the image. So it shows really how rich these seagrass beds are. And they're home to vast varieties of species. Over 180 species have been found in these beds. Let's look on the left of this really great diagram. You see jellyfish, but there's also a really interesting organism called a stalked jellyfish. And that is unbelievable.
We're just getting a message saying that somebody can't see the screen. Is that right? Are people not being able to see our screen share at the moment? If you can't, can you drop into the chat box and just let me know, because someone's saying they can't see what's being shared, but I can see what you're sharing. So we can now. Okay, great. Sorry, apologies. Carry on.
Yeah, that's all right. So these little things are stalked jellyfish, which grow on the blades. They're a protected species. They're only about half a centimeter long. So really about the size of your small fingernail. Really beautiful, delicate things that. And you're more used to jellyfish like this. Now, further onto the right this is a cuttlefish, which I think looks like a grumpy octopus. These are spectacular animals that can change the colors on their backs, depending on their mood and when they interact with other species or other ones of themselves. They lay eggs on the seagrass beds. You can see them here. These are whelks. They lay egg masses like these over here on the right. There are peacock worms, these stalked, calcareous tubes, that means chalky tubes, and these wonderful feathers that come out that feed on plankton. And this really little diagram at the right, we saw the seagrass in the first image. You can see what's above the seabed, but underneath the seabed is up to 5 meters of mats of their root systems, which grow really deep down, and the whole system locks in a lot of carbon. So why the fuss about their protection? Why do we need to think about protecting them? Well, the biodiversity I've already alluded to. There's many more species in the seagrass beds than in bare sand habitats around the edge of seagrass beds. They lock in carbon. This is incredible how efficient they are at locking in carbon. Would you believe they are 35 times more efficient than rainforests at locking in carbon? That's because in and around the base of the seagrass blades themselves, what you're seeing on the right of the image, the sand settles out and a lot of organic material, that means material that was living, falls into between those blades and is reabsorbed into the environment there. It's not released into the atmosphere, into the water column. So it really locks down carbon, we call it. So it's a carbon sink. It will help us with climate change. It's a fish nursery habitat. I already told you about the cuttlefish eggs. I've seen sharks laying eggs in seagrass beds in Cornwall. Yes, in Cornwall, there are bullhuss and cat sharks that lay their wonderful eggs in and around the base of seagrass blades. And it stabilizes the seabed. Now, Jenny's going to give a demonstration of that, which is fantastic, a little bit later, of a tank we've set up with a fake seagrass bed, but a very good fake seagrass bed, to show you that these blades and the root systems protect our beaches in some of our special places from being washed away. And because they're a plant, just like on land, they need nutrients. And of course, nutrients come from our rivers, the breakdown of leaves naturally in historical times, the matter and algae that would be in rivers, all flushes out in our estuaries and then feeds our seagrass beds with nitrogen, phosphates, and they use those nutrients to grow. Now that stops the rest of the water column getting too many nutrients, and that can suffocate other plants and animals. But because of the expansion, the growth of the human species over the past 200 years, the seagrasses have suffered from that, because where we've built in the sea is very close to our coasts, and seagrasses grow very close to our coasts. They are photosynthetic plants. They have to have light to grow, so they only grow down to about 8 to 10 meters in UK seas. So because that proximity to where we're most active and have built most of our infrastructure, like ports and harbours, they've really had a hammering. They've declined by at least 70% since the 1930s. Sadly, they've still declined in the last 30 to 40 years, so that statistic might be as high as 90%. And given their massive importance for fish habitat, for seabird stabilization, we really need to recover them. So the damage to seagrass beds is when nutrients are excessive. We have too many nutrients and then the blades get smothered by other marine life. When there's too much sedimentation in the water column, that means that there's too much matter in the water above them and they can't lock down, they can't photosynthesize as effectively. You get direct impacts from port construction. Sea level rise is a concern, but not such a great concern. It will obviously limit the amount of light that can get to them the higher the water column is, the deeper the water column is. More high temperatures generally means in the marine environment less oxygen, and plants need as much oxygen as they do need carbon dioxide within which to exist. Now, what we're trying to do and mitigate in some of the work of the MCS and other partners is anchor and mooring damage. Now, when we particularly see in the recreational boating sector, so that's people who just use pleasure boating. Now, they can drop their anchors and their moorings, and these cause problems. I'll tell you about that a little bit more detail a little later. So here's a great graphic to describe this amazing system. An unhappy seagrass bed is bad for wildlife and people. So as we've lost 90% of them, the 10% is even more important, and we need to restore it, because what that seagrass bed, it locks in the carbon between these wonderful blades and within the sediment, locks it down over long time scales. They've been there for thousands of years, our seagrass beds. And if they're disturbed, that carbon dioxide is released into the water column. And again, as I said, if the water is muckier with too much nutrients, too many flocculants, as we call them, stuff floating about in the water, you can see it in this image on the right from Plymouth Sound, where we were diving last year. You can see in the blades that are coming towards the camera, there's microalgae and other sorts of small organisms that are growing on the blades. And you can see the fresher growth of blades in the middle of the plant. So that affects the health of the seagrass bed and its ability to grow well and fast. Now, traditional moorings, that's a mooring, for those who don't know, is when a boat is tied to a permanent structure on the seabed. Very important for recreational boating and for some commercial boating. So if you see a traditional mooring, which is on the left, This is an image, by the way, by one of our partners in the project, the Royal Yachting Association. They're talking to all their members about more environmentally friendly, as we call them, advanced mooring systems. Now, the one on the left is a traditional system, and you can see the chain along the seabed would rotate as that boat rotates on the surface. It scrapes with that chain on the seabed, and that in a seagrass bed can cause an erosion halo around that block of about, would you believe, 5 to 10 meters either side of the block. So quite a large expansive area can be completely removed of its seagrass blades. And the block itself, because it's a large concrete block up to 2.5 to 3 tons, depending on the size of the boat, it can dig into the sediment and then actually clear the roots underneath the living plants. Now, the solution is simple. Of course, we need to rise the whole system above the seabed. Now, the line that goes from the mooring to the boat is called the road, as you see in the middle diagram. Now, that's a system that's used particularly in Australia and New Zealand, I think in the tropical part of America, so Florida. And there they have lower tides, and they have these spring-loaded systems whereby there's always a sense of tension in an elastic pulley, and the boat attaches to that such that the anchor is the chain isn't scraping on the seabed. And you can see also another more technical measure is to screw a screw pile into the seabed, and you can see that. Now, that takes quite a lot of effort from divers to do, but it's extremely strong and possibly stronger than a big concrete block. And it's actually quite a light thing to put into your boat to then put onto the seabed. So it's not as technically difficult to put that in. And there's another system on the right where it's much more simple than using an elasticated road. It's one where you just rise the chains up above the seabed using buoys. And I've moved my head slightly to the right, and you can see that's what the system looks like in Plymouth. We've set up 5 of those, and you can see the submerged buoys coming up to the surface and the major float for which the boat attaches. So that concentrates the whole mechanism in a much smaller space, and it lifts the road off the seabed, which is what we want. So these moorings can be improved. And of course, in the last 20 to 30 years, as we increased our number of recreational vessels, harbour masters have increased the number of moorings, and this has become more and more of a problem, not just for seagrass beds, but for other habitats like merle, which is a calcareous algae we particularly find in Foulmouth, the west coast of Scotland, some parts of southern Wales. Now, this merle habitat is again extremely important as a carbon store and is very rich in terms of the animals and plants that live not only on the merle but within it. So we're trying to protect really seagrass and merle in this project, but also other muddy estuarine habitats, stuff you wouldn't find particularly exciting perhaps on a natural history program, but are vital for biodiversity, for carbon capture, and for a fish habitat. Here's a great image, probably from the tropics, that shows what we call a mooring scar. You can see it absolutely clearly from these vessels. Now, of course, if you have the vessels close together, they will create more of these halos. So that's what we're trying to avoid and recover by having these helical screws. And excitingly, early results from our trials in Plymouth with partners, the Ocean Conservation Trust and National Marine Aquarium, have shown once you replace the traditional block moorings with these riser chains, riser buoys, there's within a year there's regrowth of the seagrass bed. So as long as you don't upset the root system, which grows the plants, you can get recovery quite quickly. So we're really excited with this method. Here's a great diagram to show how it works in a bit more detail. You can see the helical screw with a 15 centimeters girth. So that's only about that. That's the impact on the seabed, minimal compared to a concrete block, which can be up to about a meter across. The helical screw is about 1.9 meters deep, which is taller than me. So that's a very strong anchoring base. And then seagrass bed is protected by that riser road, which is the chain coming off the seabed. And you can see there's a spinning bracket at the base of the whole system here that allows the chain to spin around, so it never gets tangled up down here. And this is, on the left, is a photo from Plymouth of where our trial is, showing how the submerged buoys concertina together before they raise up. So, as well as another part of the project which the Ocean Conservation Trust are doing, which is to grow seagrass from seeds and plant it out, we feel that this ability to talk to the anchoring of the boating community and how it should change its behaviour with anchoring and moorings can really regenerate some of that seagrass we've so tragically lost over the past 120 years. This is no one's fault. We can't lay blame on anyone. This is just how we've used the marine environment. So let's see that we can work together with this exciting project moving forward. So now over to Jen for a demonstration.
Hi, so I'm just going to share with you a quick demo video of how some of the elements work that JL's just talked about there. So I'll just share my screen.
Hi, I'm Jenny from the Marine Conservation Society. Today we're going to have a look at why seagrass is so important and why we need
One second, guys. I gather that you couldn't hear the sound on that. So let me just try sharing that again with a little bit of sound on it. One moment.
Hi, I'm Jenny from the Marine Conservation Society. Today we're going to have a look at why seagrass is so important and why we need to protect it. Seagrass is a really important nursery habitat for fish. It's excellent at absorbing the damaging carbon that causes climate change, it gives us oxygen, and it can help prevent erosion. How does it do this? Let's have a look in an area without seagrass to start with. You could see the waves moving the sand on the seabed. In an area without seagrass, the wave action will move the sand and can erode the seabed, changing the habitat and the coastline. Let's have a look now at what happens in an area with seagrass. In that demo, what you should have spotted was that the sand was moving around less with the wave action. And what that means is in areas where there's seagrass, because of the roots, it holds the sediments on the seabed together, and that means that there's less erosion. Seagrass beds are scarce in the UK and are one of the most rapidly declining habitats on Earth. Because of this, MCS is currently partnering in a LIFE Recreation ReMEDIES Project to improve the condition of seagrass beds on the south coast of England.
Okay, guys, so it's pretty tricky to see the movement there, but if you look closely, you should be able to see that there was a bit more movement of the sandal on the bottom of the seabed when there isn't seagrass than when the plate of seagrass was put in. The next little demo video that I've got to share with you is one that's looking at the impact of the anchor and the halo that Jean-Luc was talking about. So I'll just stop my video so that it works a little bit better and try and share the sound straight away with you. So it won't be a second. Mooring of boat.
Mooring of boats and seagrass beds can cause huge amounts of damage. Let's have a look at how this happens. Mooring, there'll be some slack in the chain so that the boat can move around with the tides and with the wind, like we saw in the demo. Unfortunately, this also means that that chain can drag on the seabed, wearing away a circle around the mooring point and damaging the seagrass or merl in the area. This is why we need advanced mooring systems where the chain is supported so that it's not rubbing against the seabed and it's not causing any damage to the habitat. In order to protect seagrass and another critical habitat called merl, we're installing advanced boat mooring systems and partnering with the Ocean Conservation Trust and sea search divers to plant seagrass seedlings in marine protected areas along the south coast of England.
Okay, guys, so back over to Jean-Luc now, who is just going to tell us a little bit more about the project that we're working on and what's involved with that. So I'll just pass over to him. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay. So that was a great demonstration, just showing in a backyard in Cheltenham what the project's trying to achieve and how important these beds are. So I'll try and go to the next slide. Okay. I think Jen's going to describe a bit more about the project a little later. Or do you want to do that now, Jen?
Do you want to, actually, I was meant to do that now, wrong order, apologies. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, these are some activities for anybody who is under 18 and has joined us today. If you want to do some follow-up, in fact, you can do these even if you're over 18, but these are particularly thinking about the students that may be joining us today. If you want to access these today, you can get these from the URL bit.ly/Seagrass Actions. It's actually all lowercase. It's all come out in capital letters because of the font, but bit.ly/Seagrass Actions. And it's all about finding out about your nearest seagrass meadow. There's a couple of maps that are linked there in the first activity where you can have a little look and just see what's going on most local to you. There are 2 different kinds of seagrass that you can find around the UK. So there's 2 different maps, so it's worth checking both of them to see which is the nearest to where you are. Generally checking out what's happening in that area and seeing how you can get involved with what's going on down there, how you can support and spread the word about how important seagrass is, because lots of people don't know about the relevance and the importance environmentally of that. We've also got a seagrass campaign that I would urge you to have a look at and see how you could support that, how you could, again, spread the word of the work we're doing and try and get more people involved, obviously without breaking any lockdown rules. And if possible, and as and when you're able to, we would love for you to be able to go and visit your nearest seagrass meadow as well. Anything that you do with regards to seagrass in the session today, you can share with us on our Insta page at MCS_UK with the hashtag #CoreSeas. Email to us at education@mcsuk.org, or indeed you can tag me on Twitter at Andraste11. And I think, JL, there may be one more slide if you want to flick over.
Just to add to what we can get you to do, if you live near a harbour or a bay, and you usually see a lot of boats on moorings at this time of year as the sun's out and everyone wants to get out on the water. Of course, with this unusual lockdown we're in, people aren't able to get on their boats. So it'd be great if you could take some photos and send them to that email, education@mcsuk.org, just of what your harbours look like now. We need this to really understand what might be happening with the impact of this lockdown. So it'd be great to get photos now, and maybe when the lockdown's over, so we can see and compare of what your harbours look like. Now I'll talk a bit about that in a minute when Jen's finished with her stuff.
Thank you. So there's the details of our seagrass campaigns on at the moment. Do drop onto our website, mcsuk.org, and have a look at that and see what you can do to get involved. We would usually be running our Great British Beach Clean on the 3rd of September, and I would be asking everybody to get out onto beaches for that. It's not going to look quite the same this year because it's really unrealistic, let's be fair, to think that we're probably going to be able to have big events on beaches. However, we will be doing something around that time, and it will involve things that you can access from your own homes and from your local areas within the parameters of whatever lockdown rules we may or may not be under at that point in time. So check out our website, check out our social media. There'll be heaps going on, and we definitely want you to be involved. And the very last thing I'd urge you to get involved in is the 2.6 challenge. And this is all about doing something 2.6 or 26 times and being sponsored for the pleasure of doing so. So things you can do from the comfort of your own home, your back garden, if you're lucky enough to have one, somewhere, and something that you can access while you are not allowed to be out and about too much. The whole idea of it is that you'll be sponsored, and that will provide fundraising for charities like ourselves. Lots of other charities are involved in it as well. And again, you can find out information about that on our website as well. Dale, back over to you. Thanks.
Okay, just want to wrap up. We're talking about the project. The project isn't just MCS. We're strong, we're stronger because of the sum of our parts. The project is led on by Natural England, who are the government's conservation advisor. They're helping us to try and install about 75 of these advanced mooring systems to replace those traditional moorings that Jenny described erode the seabed. The Royal Yachting Association are talking to their wonderful membership about these technologies and how they might try and urge their members to replace their moorings. They have a green blue project which Kate Fortnum is working with to try and discuss with their members how to change their stuff. The Ocean Conservation Trust is the conservation wing of the National Marine Aquarium, and they're working very hard in Plymouth and for all of us project partners to deliver regeneration of seagrass in tanks, and then we're going to plant those seagrass nursery habitats out. And also they're involved in the technology of installing the moorings. And Plymouth City Council and Tamar Estuaries Consultative Forum are doing work with us, particularly in that area. Now, the project isn't, I'll just say where it is. It's in the Isles of Scilly. It's in the Foul and Halford, which is the Foulmouth, the Halford River, St. Mawes, where there is merle as well as seagrass beds. It's also in the Solandt. So if any of you are around that part of the world, you'll know how important that is for the sailing community. Also Essex estuaries, another area with a lot of estuaries. So it's South England, but it's nothing to stop you investigating these advanced mooring systems wherever you live. There's another project in North Wales. There's one in South Wales trying to sort out our seagrass problem and regenerate this habitat. So onward and upward. Over to Jen to close up.
If Jen can find the unmute button, find it. Excellent, thank you. Guys, thanks ever so much for joining us today. I really would urge you, if you do, check out your local seagrass bed, if you do any of the activities, to share.
Q&A, I forgot about Q&A.
to share back to us, but also there is an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So if you can drop down into that Q&A button at the bottom, you can fire in your questions, and then we'll get to them. I don't think there's anything in there at the moment. So if you've got anything that you want to pose of JL, whether it's about the project, about the work that he does in general for the marine protected areas, whether it's about seagrass and how that all works, or indeed any other questions, you can drop them into our Q&A box. Doesn't look like anyone's got any questions at the moment. No. Looks like we've got a resounding lack of questions about the topic from here. So JL, while we're waiting and seeing if somebody would like to pop some questions in, tell us a little bit about your work with regards to MPAs, because you don't just work on seagrass, do you?
Well, all those places I mentioned are marine protected areas. We've got a lot of them around the country, and the biggest thing that our team is concerned about is the effect of trawling in marine protected areas, and that has been slowly changing over the last decade. So you would imagine when a protected area is set up, it would be immediately protected from anything that's damaging to it, but that's highly controversial because we're in a difficult place. So a lot of our work involves working with scientists to try and demonstrate where marine protected areas are protected from these habitats. And we've definitely seen our regulators protect all of seagrass beds from trawling, but now it's over to the recreational boating sector that we need to look at, and also water quality issues, because that's a bigger problem, I would say, than even recreational boating, the pollutants that come down rivers and when we have massive flood events. So we try and deal with all these issues with our marine protected areas. So there's some Q&A questions coming up.
There are some Q&A questions. I was just going to say there are some Q&A questions. So we've got one here. How does seagrass reproduce? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a sexually reproducing plant, much like plants on land. So they produce flowers, and those flowers are fertilized by pollen, in fact, unbelievably. And then they produce seedlings, and then the seedlings are discarded and they go into the water column and can spread out around the seagrass. So the seagrass can get more dense from reproduction within the bed, and then water flow can move those seedlings outside the bed. And that's our aim. We're going to collect seagrass beds, hopefully this autumn when lockdown ends, grow them in a tank, and next spring we can plant them out. That will be the Ocean Conservation Trust who does that.
And how long will it take? Will they definitely take when we plant them out, or will we have to monitor? Like, how does that work? Will it?
Yeah, a lot of the work will be monitored by Sea Search divers, the affiliated program to MCS. So our diving community is going to be helping us to check out what's happening with the beds. The growth rate is extremely fast. There's another project called Protect Seagrass working in Wales, and they've just put a video on YouTube of the growth of seagrass blades, and they can grow up to 10 centimeters a year, we think. So they can grow really, really rapidly. So we need to get the process started, and then we'll get quick wins. The marine environment is often a slow place to work in terms of getting wins, but we're going to see some really fast regrowth and regeneration of the beds if we see full implementation of the project.
Excellent. Okay, there's another question here. Are there opportunities to get involved in activities around the Solandt? And that's from Jack, who lives in Southampton. Jack's 11.
Yeah, I think that really interesting question because of this lockdown. If you could go out, Jack, if you're able to, from your house and able to take some pictures of what's going on in your local marinas and harbours, maybe have a conversation with your local harbour master and see if they're aware of this, and that actually maybe your community does want to see regeneration of seagrass. Because with many things in life, there's hesitancy within people to change their practices, but we think just adding a few buoys on your anchor chain, your mooring chain, can be a good thing. So it doesn't have to be necessarily hugely costly, but getting the information out there and the demand from the public to see this change and see seagrass beds recover is really important. So go and have a chat with your harbour master and see what they think.
We're also planning to run some school and some education sessions around the areas that we're working in as well. But obviously at the moment everything's paused. So hopefully, Jack, we might be able to come and visit your school as well. So yeah, we'll be promoting what we're doing on our social media, but obviously we don't know when we'll be able to do anything face to face at the moment.
Let's hope next year we'll be getting out to schools in all the project locations with the Ocean Conservation Trust. Jen herself will be working and so will our sea champions. So we're hopeful things will really go fast from autumn this year, and next year we'll be really ready to show people how the regeneration stuff's working.
Another quick question is, do people who own boats know they're damaging the seagrass?
That's a very good question. I think some do, and they have an intrinsic understanding that yes, if they were to look under their boat and were able to see the seagrass bed, they'd have a real concern about it. And surveys done by the Ocean Conservation Trust and RYA show that most boaters, of course, would rather not anchor on a living habitat. But maps aren't great, and we don't really have a great understanding where these places are. There has been a lot of bad press around a place called Studland, but we think we can overcome that because most people want to be reasonable, and most people wouldn't want to damage the seagrass beds in the world. Obviously, there's a safety concern. If there's a real concern of the wind blowing your boat away, you might want to go closer to coast, and that would necessitate you putting your anchor in a seagrass bed. Of course, that's a reasonable thing to do. But in general, what we're trying to do with this project is raise awareness of where the seagrass beds are. The Royal Yachting Association will tell its members, please don't anchor on seagrass beds. If you have to use a particular type of anchor blade, get in touch with them if you want to get further details of that. And with the moorings, of course, we're seeing increasing understanding from both the recreational sector and the harbour masters that they will work with about these technologies that are developing and are more appropriate for UK waters. So it's a bit of a pilot project in a way, but 75 moorings isn't going to solve the entire problem and the regeneration of beds, but it's going to start a conversation so that hopefully in 10 years this becomes normal. It's changing what's normal in boating practice. That could be the good and exciting thing. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer.
No, that's a perfect answer. As much detail as possible is a good answer. I'm just having a little look, and there's no more questions. There's a little bit in chat. There's a few people that have had to drop out, but Andrew's just asked if we'll be having further sessions on different topics, and we absolutely will. There's a whole host that are advertised on our website. There's some for primary schools, some for secondary, and there will be some for a general kind of adult audience as well. And they'll all be posted up on our website, so just keep an eye on our social media to find out any more. If there's no more questions, and JL, did you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
No, thanks for joining us. It was really good to hear from you. Some great questions. Would love those photos.
Absolutely, and from my perspective, would love to find out anything more about anything that you've done from today if you are a young person joining us. So guys, thanks ever so much. Hopefully you know a little bit more about seagrass, and you'll be able to go out there and share the word, spread the word, and make sure everybody else knows just how important it is as well. Thanks ever so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.